I couldn't believe my ears. But there they were, right in front of me, delivering the news with seeming concern for my well-being, but apparently without a fucking clue how it would be received. I may not have been emotionally demonstrative throughout my life, but just because I don't hide my feelings doesn't mean I don't have them. I have deep feelings. The pain was unbearable. It got worse and worse. Finally, everything went dark. Growing up in the Midwestern United States, I was always a quiet child. That's what my parents tell me, and that's what I at least partially remember. I've also always been reserved and cautious, at least by other people's standards. Smart and pretty were also used to describe me, although this did not always work out in my favor, especially when in 6th grade Mrs. Jensen announced to the whole class, "Jimmy Quayle, you must be the most gifted student I have ever had," or was in 16 years of teaching. Many kids in the competitive environment I grew up in didn't like the grading curve being ruined by some smart guys, which made me even more reserved than before. My brother Brett, who is 2 years older than me, really helped in some ways. He tried to involve me in his activities, unless his friends really objected. Then he excluded me, but tried to let me down easily. Since Brett was primarily an extroverted athlete, and I was primarily an introverted intellectual, we did not usually compete head-to-head for our parents' attention, although if there was ever direct competition, it seemed to me that 90% of the time, one extroverted athlete. College was better for me than elementary and high school. Intelligence was valued at the school I attended on a full academic scholarship, and being smart and good-looking were advantages when approaching women. I graduated from college a year early. I have had several pleasant relationships with classmates, some platonic and some sexual. I was far from being a stud, but by the time I graduated, I thought I was handling it pretty well. At least my girlfriends often complimented me on it. I met Giselle during my 2nd year as an analyst for the company, as the CIA is affectionately known in Washington, D.C. We met at a bar in Georgetown. A bar is almost never a good place to find romantic interests, but I assumed this was an exception because we were both there with a group, separate groups, for a party with a friend who had just gotten engaged. The bar wasn't a place either of us went to get dates or get picked up. For me, it truly was the elusive love at first sight. I can't speak for Giselle in this regard, but she definitely seemed interested. Long story short, we left the bar together to go somewhere to talk. We had sex for 3 weeks and got married 3 months after we met. My first sex with Giselle sealed the deal in my mind. This was our 4th date, and she was very friendly throughout the evening, despite her almost zero alcohol consumption. The way she pressed herself against me and the looks she gave me with her big brown doe eyes showed total submission. She never said anything like, "Let's have sex," or "I need you," or anything suggestive. Rather, she was giving every nonverbal signal imaginable that she was available. When we got to my apartment, she didn't take off her clothes or jump into my arms. Again, these were all available nonverbal cues. Whatever I wanted was mine, and I could take it. By the next morning, when I drove her home after breakfast, she looked at me with doe eyes, kissed me, and said, "Thank you so much, Jimmy. You are so kind and gentle. Do whatever you want to me, whenever you want, before you turn around and enter your apartment." Giselle has never openly initiated sex, but she wasn't lying when she said she was available at any time. Giselle's approach to sex wouldn't appeal to guys who like physically aggressive women, but she was perfect for me. Giselle's parents died several years before I met her. Her only close, emotionally, not geographically, living relative was her sister, Michele. She seemed completely devoted to Michele and talked about her constantly. Michele lived in Northern California and neither of them were wealthy, so they mostly communicated by phone, although Giselle did fly out to visit Michele twice in the 3 months between the time I met Giselle and our wedding. Our wedding was small because Giselle and I had to pay for it. Maybe only 30 guests. My brother Brett was my best man. He seemed to really like Giselle from the second he met her, and in the few days that he and my parents were in town before the wedding, he told me several times that I was lucky. Michele was Giselle's bridesmaid. I only saw her for about 10 hours the weekend after the wedding, as she and Giselle spent most of the time doing their girly things. There were no elaborate pre-parties, and Giselle and I headed off to our honeymoon straight from the low-key reception. I was a little surprised by Michelle's appearance when I finally met her. She had thick glasses and a lazy look that is not easily seen in photographs of her. Giselle did tell me that her eyesight was bad and she couldn't drive, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I met her. Besides, though, if they were both wearing sunglasses, they couldn't be said to be sisters. Michelle was nowhere near as pretty, and was probably 7 kilos heavier than Giselle's lithe figure. The honeymoon in Aruba was phenomenal, and Giselle's sexual compliance reached a new level. Soon after we returned from our honeymoon, some facts about Giselle's real life that had been hidden came to the fore. As a CIA analyst, I probably should have suspected something when Giselle moved in with me after we'd known each other for only 6 weeks and didn't seem to care at all about renting an apartment. She told me that she works every other time and can leave anytime she wants. In fact, she was on the verge of being evicted for not paying rent. I was also shocked by her credit card and student loan debt. Even though she had a college degree, she just didn't seem to get how to handle a credit card. I didn't know that she paid for Michelle's entire trip to Washington, plane ticket, accommodation, taxi, food, etc. Given Giselle's credit history and debt, I separated our finances shortly after our wedding and gave her only one low-limit credit card that I carefully monitored. We worked hard to pay off her existing debt and college loans, but we weren't doing it very well or quickly, especially since she insisted on flying out every 2 months or so to see Michelle, which was at least cheaper than bringing Michelle to DC. Despite the financial problems, I was happy in my marriage because Giselle was always available to me, both emotionally and physically. Making love to her felt so damn good every time, and she loved to cuddle and say nice things to me. Surprisingly, a couple of months after Giselle and I got married, my brother Brett took a job in DC and moved about 2 miles from Giselle and I's apartment in Northern Virginia. He visited occasionally and always seemed to enjoy our hospitality. Giselle was really sweet to him, and I know he appreciated that she accepted him into our new little family so easily. We did end up running into a major problem when a loan that Giselle had that I didn't even know about fell due about 6 months after we got married, and the bank that held it threatened legal action. Around the same time, Giselle was moved to a part-time position in her office due to budget cuts, or so she said. But I suspected it was due to her frequent absences to visit Michelle. Giselle and I have talked many times about our financial situation. She always apologized, but never really contributed to solving the problem, other than making me happy by hugging me and batting her eyelashes, and then letting me do whatever I wanted with her, and then thanking me profusely. When the bank actually filed a claim, I decided I needed to take drastic action. Evil corporation. I can't identify it because I signed a confidentiality agreement, and the former CEO, affectionately known as Darth Vader, before he became the least popular vice president in U.S. history. I haven't given away too much, haven't I? Was a despair for analysts working in Iraq. Former company analysts were a particularly valuable commodity. I interviewed with Evil Corp, and they offered me a job that was 4 times what I was making at the company doing similar work. The only problem was that it was in Iraq. Giselle and I had a lot of heart-to-heart conversations about this. She assured me that our relationship could survive, especially since Evil Corp paid me for 2 weeks of research work every 4 months of service, and for this, I could take Giselle anywhere in the world. I left the company and joined Evil Corp, and persuaded the bank to suspend the lawsuit by promising that each month a portion of my salary would be paid directly to them to pay off Giselle's loan. Working in Iraq was really shitty. Although this involved analysis similar to what I had done at the company, I was in a dangerous area and could never even leave the building in which I worked and lived without an armed escort. I got the feeling that my analysis did not lead to anything good for the people of Iraq, but simply helped the evil corporation make decent amounts of money at the expense of U.S. taxpayers. Luckily, I emailed Giselle every day and made phone calls once a week. In some ways it strengthened me, But in others, it spoiled me because I craved her tender touches and always available sex. The first 2 weeks of my holiday with Giselle were amazing. We went to Hawaii, did whatever we wanted. By the time we left, she returned to Virginia, and I to return to Iraq. We were bleary-eyed and bow-legged. After only 5 months of work, I received a promotion at Evil Corp. So I was earning 6 times what I had made when I was with the company. The extra money I received, all tax-free, I put into an account I opened in the Cayman Islands. Working and living conditions were still crap. My second 2-week vacation with Giselle, after 8 months in Iraq, started out weird. We met in Athens and visited all the Greek islands. The first 2 days we spent in Athens, Giselle was reserved, but since she was the same, ready to make love anywhere, anytime, anyway, by the time we got to Rhodes, I chalked it up to jet lag or general malaise. I assessed this differently than I would analyze data in my own work. On our last day in Mykonos, the last stop on our trip, we spent the entire day in bed testing our body's limits. Between my 8th and 12th months in Iraq, I noticed some strange things popping up in Giselle's emails. When we talked on the phone and I broached the topic, she simply laughed it off. A couple of times when we were talking on what would have been mornings in Virginia, she would interrupt our conversations by going silent and zoning out for a while. She said she might have the flu or severe allergies. As my third 2-week vacation approached, Giselle invited me to come home to Virginia for her. In fact, I was thinking the same thing myself. Our financial situation was now much better as my extra income allowed us to pay off almost all of Giselle's debts, and I had over $50,000 in my account in the Cayman Islands. When I arrived at Dulles Airport, it was my father who greeted me, not Giselle. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I asked, almost stunned. "Hi, Jimmy," he replied with a smile, but with a strange look in his eyes as he hugged me. "Mom and I were able to come to visit and wanted to surprise you. She, Giselle, and Brett are waiting for you at your apartment." As we chatted on the way home, Dad was unusually circumspect. At some point, it seemed to me that he wanted to tell me something, but the words got stuck in his throat. Perhaps I didn't look at him as carefully as I should have, because looking back, I could tell he was nervous, bordering on panic, but I couldn't wait to see Giselle. I was disappointed that there would be others there, and I wouldn't be able to make love to her as soon as I walked through the door. When I got to the apartment, Mom, Brett, and Giselle had strange looks on their faces. When Giselle stood up, it was obvious that she was wearing maternity clothes, which shocked the hell out of me. The subsequent discussion is imprinted on my mind in a blur. I remember sitting for a while Brett spoke, and Mom would occasionally interject a kind word or thought while Giselle sat and cried. I don't remember the exact words, but after several minutes of complete confusion, I wondered how Giselle could be 6 months pregnant when I had seen her only 4 and 8 months ago. The meaning of what was said dawned on me. Giselle was carrying Brett's baby. They didn't want this to happen, my mom assured me, and everyone feels terrible about it, but according to everyone, we needed to talk it out. I felt dizzy and moaned, "No, no way in hell." I stood up and then continued to lose consciousness. According to my mother, when I woke up in the hospital, I fell on my face, breaking my nose and left cheekbone and causing other injuries. When I woke up in the hospital, only my mother was there and she was crying. As soon as she saw that I had woken up, she said, "Oh, Jimmy dear, I'm so glad to see that your eyes are open. Let me call Dad, Brett, and Giselle. I'll ask them to come. They wanted to see you as soon as you woke up." "Wait a second, Mom," I muttered, unable to speak properly. "How long have I been here?" "Well, you had a concussion and were drifting in and out of consciousness, so you spent the night here." "It's about 8 in the morning the day after your plane arrived," she said. "You didn't sleep all night?" I asked, noticing her clouded eyes. "Yes, dear. I was so worried, especially after the disturbing news we told you," she replied, holding my hand. "Mom, please don't call anyone else yet," I begged. Just at that moment, a female doctor and a nurse entered. "Mr. Quayle, I'm Dr. Jacobs, and this is Nurse Thomas," the doctor said, shaking my hand, and then immediately took out several instruments and examined my eyes and head. After a few minutes of examination, she continued, "I'm so glad to see that you're awake. We were worried about you, but the fact that you are conscious now means that after a few days of rest, you will be fine." "Thank you, doctor," I said. "I need to talk to you about something in private. Mom, could you please go to the cafeteria, have breakfast, and come back in an hour? Please do not, under any circumstances, call your dad or my ex-brother and ex-wife." I could tell the words ex stunned her. She gasped involuntarily and then began to speak, but I interrupted her. "If you care at all about me, you will do as I say, and then we will talk again." "Okay, Jimmy," was her weak response as she left the room with a dissatisfied expression on her face. The doctor and nurse were wide-eyed. "Dr. Jacobs, what kind of damage is on my face?" "You will need plastic surgery on your nose and left cheek," she replied. "We have a doctor-patient relationship, right? So you and Nurse Thomas can't tell anyone what we're talking about until I give you permission, right?" "Yes, that's right," she and the nurse said, nodding. "If I have to have surgery anyway, can I have it to change my appearance?" Of course. If you really want it, but it's not necessary," the doctor answered before I interrupted her. "Great. Could you recommend to me the best plastic surgeon in the area who could change my appearance?" "Yes," she answered, and then turned to Nurse Thomas. "Gloria, could you go to the front desk and take the address of Dr. Simon Kent's office with a phone number from the computer and bring it here?" "Of course, I'll be right back," Nurse Thomas replied. As soon as she left, I had a few more questions for Dr. Jacobs, and finally I asked, "Is there any reason why I cannot be discharged immediately?" "I strongly recommend that you stay another night. You may faint, which could have catastrophic consequences," she replied, looking very worried. "Is there a way that I could be transferred to another ward that all staff would be prohibited from telling anyone else about? If you can do it, I'll stay. Otherwise, I'm leaving now, no matter the risk," I told her. She looked at my card. "I see you have first-class health insurance." "Yes, Evil Corp. Has really good benefits." I chuckled to myself. "I could transfer you to a section for specially protected persons. I can think of an excuse for this. In this wing, you can turn away all visitors, and they won't be able to get through security," she said. "Can you do this before my mom gets back?" I asked. "I think so," she said. She picked up the phone in my room, barked a few orders, and then hung up. "The order will be here in 10 minutes. Just then, Nurse Thomas entered the room with the name of the plastic surgeon. Luckily, my wallet, cell phone, and other important items were in the fanny pack I was wearing and which I took with me to the hospital. I put Dr. Kent's information in my fanny pack and thanked the doctor and nurse. As promised, I was transferred to a section for specially protected persons, and at my insistence, they did not receive visitors. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more nights, just to make sure I would be fully functional when I left, and also because it was the perfect place to hide. Since Evil Corp, I paid the bill. I didn't care how much it would cost. By the middle of the first day, when I woke up, I was able to go into analyst mode and think clearly about what I was going to do. My emotional pain was the worst of my life by an order of magnitude, but I was able to temporarily block it because I had a mission. A mission to get out of my pathetic situation and take revenge on my ex-brother and future ex-wife. I didn't have to talk to anyone at Evil Corp for 11 more days. At that time, I would have quit, or completed a couple of projects if I could have done them in the US rather than in Iraq, and accomplished most of what I wanted to do. I rented a hotel room, made an urgent appointment through Dr. Jacobs with Dr. Kent, and went to see him. After a thorough examination, he assured me that he could restore me exactly as I was, or significantly alter me. I looked at a few examples from other people. I still wanted to be cute, even though I wanted to look completely different. I chose one and made an appointment for surgery the next day. Of course, Dr. Kent wouldn't make me exactly like the model face I had chosen, but very much like it and definitely cute. After surgery, I spent the night in the hospital and returned to my hotel room the next day. Only after the operation did I check my mobile phone. There were a lot of messages, mostly from my parents and 2 each from Brett and Giselle. They all wanted to know if I was okay and to talk. The last message from my mom made her sound hysterical. Although I was unhappy that she and Dad were in my apartment with cheaters, I could imagine that she thought she wanted to comfort me and prevent a war between her children, so I sympathized with her a little. I called her on her mobile. "Hi, Mom. It's Jimmy," I said. She cried and then said, "Where are you, dear?" I worried so much. I thought maybe you were taken by the CIA, or you died and the hospital didn't tell us, or... I cut her off. "Nothing like that, Mom. I just wanted to make sure I didn't see Brett or Giselle because I could have killed them." "Oh, dear. Listen, Mom. Just listen and don't talk. I just wanted you to know that I'm okay. I'll stay at a hotel for a few days and then go on a trip to clear my head. See you before we leave." "Where are you, Jimmy? In which hotel?" "I'll come to you now," she moaned. "I'm at the Key Bridge Hotel Marriott, number 1412, but don't come now. I'll let you know when. This is important. Under no circumstances should you tell Dad, Brett, or Giselle where I am. Do you understand?" "But Jimmy, they care about you and want to make sure you're okay." She began to mumble. "Stop it. You understand? You must not tell them under any circumstances. Brett and Giselle are dead to me, and you and Dad will be dead too if you tell them where I am. Understood?" "So far, so good, Jimmy." She sobbed into the phone. "I'll call you in a couple of days," I replied. The next day, I met one of my friends, I'll call him Jay, from the CIA on a bench at the mall. He participated in secret operations. He was legitimately nuts. Aren't all people involved in black ops? But he liked me, because when I worked for the company, I gave him very valuable analysis, which, as he claimed, saved his life. Since he wasn't one to over-dramatize, this was most likely true. Either way, true or not, Jay felt he owed me. What I wanted from Jay was a new identity. Once the bandages were removed from my new face and it had healed enough for me to look quite normal, I wanted a passport, a new social security number, and a history. "You're asking a lot, Jimmy," he replied, taking a drag from his cigarette. "But no more than your life is worth, right?" I said with a wide smile. He smiled. "Because you won't need it for some time, like a month, right?" I nodded my head, and then he continued, "Perhaps I can think of something. Give me a list of possible new names and dates of birth," he said. "Way ahead of you, Jay." "I'm much ahead," I grinned, handing him a piece of paper. He glanced at it quickly, put it in his jacket pocket, put out the cigarette, and pulled out a disposable cell phone from his pocket. "Come every day around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Jimmy. I'll let you know where to come for the photo shoot and when everything is ready." "I really appreciate it," I replied. "How much is it?" "I can get a special discount by calling to ask for a favor." $10,000 is fine for my boyfriend, not for me," he replied. "Certainly. Do you need it now?" I retorted. "No, in cash, when the documents are delivered." We shook hands, and he disappeared into the crowd at the mall. The next afternoon, I was sitting in my hotel room on my newly purchased laptop computer, typing in details of my future plans, when there was a knock on the door. I expected to be served food in my room. I rarely left my room with my headbands on, with my afternoon tea, so I opened it without looking through the peephole. It was my fucking ex-brother. He looked puzzled by my appearance, as my new face was completely bandaged and unrecognizable. He assumed it was me. "Jimmy, I know you hate me right now, but we really need to talk about this. I don't want..." That's all he achieved. He really didn't expect this. I hit. While I was just an analyst, hanging out with crazy ex-military types in Iraq when I had free time gave me some training in self-defense, or really offense. Not much, but for an unsuspecting civilian like Brett, it was enough. Brett collapsed on his face, not unconscious, but immobilized. I took my laptop and the few things I had purchased and put them in my newly purchased backpack. I then checked out of the hotel, leaving Brett in my room. This incident required a slight change of plans. I immediately called my local contact at Evil Corp and went to him. I told him I was quitting, but that if they gave me a $25,000 bonus, my regular salary, and a month's safe harbor, I would finish the last 2 projects I was working on. He tried to talk me out of quitting, or at least doing the job at normal pay without a bonus. But I knew how important the projects were to Evil Corp, so I remained adamant. He gave in, and as soon as my bonus, money, and salary advance arrived in my account in the Cayman Islands, I had a key to one of Evil Corp's safe houses. In the area, I started working on projects. A week later, when I checked the phone Jay gave me, there was a message. "We'll meet tomorrow at noon at the same place. Don't take anything with you." When I got there, Jay was already sitting on our favorite bench. "How are you?" I asked. "The proverbial good news and bad news. Which ones do you want to get first?" he answered. "Damn it, I think these are bad. Even asking about the favor, I can't do it for less than $20,000. "Wow!" I exclaimed. "Then good news better be really good." "This is true. As long as you are comfortable with the name Justin Reddy, I can get you documents and a story so good that even a talented analyst like you would probably never be able to get to the bottom of the truth. It even includes your fingerprints and DNA in Justin Reddy's file in the FBI database, but not in your file anymore," he replied with a devilish grin. "Hello, my name is Justin Reddy." "Nice to meet you," I laughed, extending my hand to Jay. "Are you kidding me?" When Jay punched me, he snorted, "Unreal, ha! I was hoping for 80% protection for you, but instead you're getting something close to bulletproof. Now open your mouth and let me take a DNA sample," he continued, taking a sampler from his jacket pocket. As soon as he took his tampon from the inside of my cheek, he closed the container and said, "Same as before. Every day around 17 specify time and place for a photo shoot, paperwork, and money transfer." Within 3 weeks, I had a new and complete set of identification documents, a dossier with all the background information on Justin Reddy, and I had completed my projects for Evil Corp. I was glad when Jay, who was present at the meeting where I exchanged $20,000 in cash for my documents, did not recognize me until I spoke. Not only has my face changed significantly, I now have natural blonde streaks in my brown hair and brown contact lenses to hide my blue eyes. If someone as observant as Jay didn't recognize me, I can be pretty sure that no one else will either. Before I left DC, I called my mother on her cell phone, using the phone Jay gave me. "Mom, I can't believe you told Brett where I was. I think you've chosen a side," were the first words I said to her. "Jimmy. Oh, Jimmy, thanks for calling. I swear, I didn't want to tell anyone where you were. But Dad convinced me that I should tell Brett so we could work things out without breaking up the family. You didn't have to hurt him like that, I cut her off. "I don't give a damn about this fucking asshole," I yelled. I never swore in front of my mother, so this really caught her attention as there was a clear gasp on the line. "The family is destroyed. My call has only 3 purposes. The first is to tell you that you, Dad, are an asshole and cheater. You'll never hear from me again. The second is to ask you to tell her to file for divorce on the grounds of abandonment. She doesn't have any of the financial assets that I want, and I've already withdrawn everything that was left in our joint checking account. Third, tell her that I wish her the most miserable fucking life in the world." That's where I ended the conversation. I took out the SIM card from the burner phone and crushed it. Then I did the environmentally responsible thing and recycled the burner phone. Like Justin Reddy, I landed at the San Francisco airport a day later with approximately $60,000 in a bank account in Justin's name, a powerful, secure laptop, a business plan, and personal plans for the future. To put things in order, I found a cheap apartment, a cheap office, but with excellent internet access, and where Giselle's sister Michelle lived and worked. Why did I want to know where Michelle lived and worked? This was the main component of my revenge. This is something I never thought I was capable of a few years ago. But I had so much animosity towards Giselle and Brett that I wanted to make their lives miserable in any way I could. Until I made a lot of money, the best way to do this, in my now diabolical mind, was to make Michelle fall in love with me and then leave her. possibly several times. It would be devastating for Giselle if her sister was emotionally upset and I didn't really care about Michelle. My business plan started working very well. I offered to conduct a free exploratory research project for companies in the greater San Francisco Bay Area and analyze the data. It didn't matter to me what it was about because I was working for the company and Evil Corp. I learned how to find data of almost any type and process it. 90% of the companies that responded to my opening proposal became paying clients. And within 8 months, I had as much work as I could get done at a very high hourly rate and with little overhead. Within a year, I was hiring college students part-time to help out at the high-profit center. I was well on my way to achieving my financial goals. For 10 months, I had real control over Michelle's activities. She seemed to have left a relatively quiet life. She worked as a hostess in a restaurant and didn't seem to do much on the weekends, although sometimes I saw her with a boyfriend. Her lazy eyes and poor vision seemed to limit her activities. There was one change in her daily routine that made her more approachable. She joined a health club. I signed up for the same health club. I wanted to encourage Michelle to make going to the gym an important part of her routine. So I introduced myself, immediately struck up a conversation with her, and praised her dedication. At first, she was a little reserved. I thought it might be because she recognized something about me, even though I had only interacted with her for 2 days over a year ago. She had poor eyesight, and my face was completely different. However, in the 4th session we attended together, her attitude completely changed and she became friendly. Seducing Michelle wasn't the hardest thing in the world. Since I was prettier and smarter than any other guy who had ever shown interest in her before, as soon as she started interacting with me in a friendly manner, it became clear that she was quickly falling in love with me. My original plan was to take my time with Michelle. However, as I spent all my time building my business and figuring out her schedule, I was getting really excited. While I was looking for sex, I didn't have enough time to achieve a high success rate. Once I even hired an expensive girl. It was the weekend that Giselle was visiting Michelle. I didn't want to be around Giselle, but the loss of my sex life with her came from the back of my mind to the forefront. Hence the girl. The girl's name was Tammy. Cost me $3,000 for the weekend, but she was worth every penny. A week after Giselle left, I asked Michelle out on a Sunday afternoon. Attending a live performance was not a legal option due to her poor eyesight, but a number of other entertainment options were available. We went on a boat ride, had a picnic on the island, went to an amusement park, and had a casual dinner. When I kissed her goodnight, she was so excited and literally drooling over what a great time she was having. During the date, I did everything I could to match what every other woman I had ever known liked. I knew it was working when Michelle gave me an admiring look at the club on the Tuesday after our Sunday date. Michelle's lazy gaze and thick glasses ensured that no one would mistake her for a pretty woman. However, her body was actually quite beautiful, and by the time of our first date, it was clear that it was getting better. I'd estimate that since she started going to the gym, she's lost at least 3 kilograms, where she wanted to lose them. And if she lost another 5 kilograms, most guys would consider that she has a great body. When I realized that I was having a hard time interacting with Michelle on the Wednesday after our date, when I got a good look at her breasts, when I noticed her doing a few lifts, I abandoned my take-it-slow plan and decided instead that it's time to have sex with her. That Sunday, we went on another nice date that included a late dinner. Neither of us were particularly hungry at our usual dinner time, so I invited her over to my house for a snack. She was almost flippant in her agreement. When I brought her to my apartment, I was left in no doubt about what I wanted. "Michelle, I lied to you so you would come to my house," I said, taking off her glasses just seconds after the door to my apartment closed. "The snack that interests me is you." Her responses to this weren't smooth, but that didn't matter. She didn't resist at all, but was clearly hesitant about what to do, so I completely took the initiative into my own hands. Michelle was in no condition to go home afterwards and did not express any desire to do so. I really enjoyed making love to her. The next morning, after we both did our business in the bathroom and then took a shower together, she stared at me with that weird, lazy look and giggled, "Thanks, Justin. It was the best night of my life, even if I won't be able to walk properly today. I should be thanking you." "You're doing great," I answered. After I said this, I suddenly realized that this is what I meant. Despite my motives, when I got her into bed, I enjoyed it immensely. I was also surprised that the 3 to 5 kilograms of fat she had on her torso and thighs didn't turn me off in the slightest. She blushed, lowered her eyes, and then said, "I'm very glad you liked it because I never considered myself sexy. However, there is one problem. Well, I don't know how to say this." "Then just say it," I grinned, "or I'll take you back to bed." She blushed a little more and then faltered. "Well, I don't have much experience, and I don't take pills. I don't want get pregnant. And," I interrupted her, "I'll stop by the pharmacy with you on the way to work, and you can use Plan B." A mocking expression appeared on her face. "What's Plan B?" At first, I thought she was joking and chuckled. When the puzzled look remained, I said, "These are tablets that can be purchased at any pharmacy. I'll even go with you to buy them and pay for them if you want." "Could you do that, please?" she stammered. I did. On Tuesday, when we met at the fitness club, she was all beaming with a smile, just like me. I asked her if we could end our session about 10 minutes early as I wanted to talk to her about something. She readily agreed. After practice, we walked to my car and sat in the front seat together. "Michelle, I really enjoyed sex with you on Sunday. I would like to set up a regular schedule with you for the future. Do you agree?" "Oh, yeah," she blurted out, then suddenly became embarrassed and muttered, "What do you mean?" "That you spend the night with me 3 or 4 times a week. I know you have a roommate, and I don't want to get you in trouble there. Besides, I need you to go to the doctor and take some pills," I quickly replied. "I would love to, but do you know if these pills are expensive?" "I don't know because before our meeting on Sunday night, I always used rubber bands, and I don't have coverage for them through my work health insurance." "No problem. You bring me the recipe, and I will get them for you." "Do you want sex with me enough to do this?" she asked in surprise. "Couldn't you tell how much I enjoyed Sunday?" I asked. Actually, I'm ashamed, Justin, but I was so out of it after you did what you did to me that I didn't realize anything else." "Sorry," I laughed. "Everything is fine. Then let me just tell you. I really liked it. This began our long-term sexual relationship. As I continued to sleep with other girls, I began to focus on it less and less, because after about a month of studying with Michelle 3 or 4 times a week, I realized that she was a good student and was giving herself completely to me. I really enjoyed myself. Early in my sexual relationship with Michelle, I called the lawyer I had dealt with in Virginia. I asked her to check the status of Jimmy Quayle's divorce from Giselle and any other information she could easily find. The next day, she reported that the divorce had been final about 6 weeks ago. A few days later, Giselle married Brett Quayle, my asshole brother, and that about a year before that, Giselle gave birth to a baby boy. It's no surprise that the terms of the divorce, since it was based on abandonment of the child and since Giselle was not seeking child support, were terribly kind of her, right? Were that Giselle received all the remaining property of the spouses, with the exception of half of the savings account, which was held in trust for Giselle. He will return to Giselle if he is not in demand within the next year. Even though it was only a few $1,000s, I never wanted her to have it, so I signed a power of attorney in Jimmy Quayle's name, told my lawyer to take the money, deduct her fee, and give the rest to the Red Cross. After 2 months of regular sex with Michelle, I had a problem. I knew that she was in love with me and that she talked a lot about it with Giselle. That, by now, Giselle would be emotionally involved in my relationship with Michelle. This would mean that I would have achieved my goal of seriously hurting Giselle when I left Michelle. However, I didn't want to leave her, at least not yet. I was starting to look at Michelle as an innocent victim. In addition, Michelle's almost daily workouts with me at the fitness club have changed her body. Now, not only was she no longer overweight, but fortunately she was no longer thin, but her hips had also acquired a sculpted shape. Her body would now best be described as hot. After agonizing over this problem for a while, I decided that it would make me feel better if I gave Michelle a real gift that would help her recover better when I left her. By that time, I was quickly achieving my financial goals, so I could easily afford what I had in mind. I consulted several ophthalmologists and found one in Pacific Heights, Dr. Noyes, who was not only highly rated, but also claimed to have developed a technique for successful eye surgery, lazy eyes, even in adults. All the other surgeons I talked to said it was somewhere between impracticality and impossibility. I took Michelle with me to see Dr. Noyes. After Michelle was examined for almost an hour by Dr. Noyes and his staff, he met with us and gave us his prognosis. The condition of Michelle's left lazy eye is serious. Additionally, her right eye is not strong enough to compensate for her lazy eye, which is why her vision is so poor. However, the good news is that I can easily correct the problem with her right eye, and I can make her left eye cosmetically very, very close to normal. The bad news is that there is only a 30% chance or so that the left eye will gain vision that is close to normal, and surgery can only be done once. I took this as good news. I looked at Michelle and there were tears in her eyes. How much will it cost and when will you be free? Were my next questions. The cost is $25,000. You can talk to my administrator about the schedule. Tell her to allow 2.5 hours. I will most likely have a window of 2 or 3 weeks. Wednesday and Thursday are my normal surgical days, Dr. Noyes replied. After the operation, Michelle will need 4 days of bed rest with blindfolds and another 2 days without sunlight, he continued. He must have read my thoughts when he continued. And no pranks or any other types of physical activity on the days of best rest. Michelle looked a little upset. I thanked Dr. Noyes profusely. Michelle also nodded in gratitude, and we left his office. When I paid for the office visit, I asked the receptionist when the doctor had availability for the 2.5-hour surgery. Looking at her book, she said, Wednesday, 2 weeks starting tomorrow at 8:00 a.m., or 3 weeks starting this Thursday at 11:00 a.m. are the next 2 possibilities. However, you will need to let me know by tomorrow to make sure you get one of these dates, and the doctor will require $10,000 up front. I thanked her, and we left. Michelle was silent as we walked to the car, but as soon as we got in, she started yelling at me for the first time in our relationship. How could you be so cruel, she exclaimed, to bring me there to give me hope of improving my condition when I can't afford such an operation? I'd rather remain in the dark about this. I learned to live with my limitations. She began to sob hysterically, covering her face with her hands. I grabbed both her wrists tightly and pulled her arms down to her sides. You are going to have an operation, and I am paying for it. So stop whining and take time off during your surgery and recovery. With these words, I let go of her hands, started the car, and drove away. Michelle's tears soon stopped, but she remained silent until we reached her house. I believe this is your stop, I said with a hint of resentment in my voice. Justin, I'm sorry I yelled at you and said what I did. However, I cannot afford you to pay for the operation. I just cannot. I leave you no choice, I answered in a stern voice. If you don't have the operation, I will never be with you again. Don't test me on this, because you'll know I'm serious. Then I said something that surprised even myself, certainly something that came from my inner soul and was certainly not a conscious thought. I want everyone else to see how beautiful you are, and your current appearance prevents that. We were both shocked by this statement, but I quickly followed it up. By the time I pick you up tomorrow to come to my house, you will get time off from work and tell me which of the 2 dates that the secretary gave us. The best. Michelle was stunned. I couldn't tell if she was happy and her shock was masking it, or if she was angry. Either way, she got out of the car without saying a word and walked into her apartment without looking back. When I returned to work, my head was in chaos. I still had the concept of a gift in my mind to ease my conscience before I left her to hurt Giselle, but then deep down I wondered if I really wanted a real relationship with Michelle and find someone else's way to get revenge on Giselle. When I picked Michelle up for one of our planned get-togethers on Wednesday night after she got off work, she had a smile on her face. Well, have you agreed on time off from work during the operation and recovery? I asked, with a stern expression on my face. I still can't believe you're going to do this, but yes, I did it. If you still want to do this, we can make an appointment in 3 weeks, starting tomorrow. However, you have to understand one thing, she giggled. What is this? I asked. I'm going to do everything I can to fuck you so hard today that you might need another operation in the future, she growled, then giggled after a pause. I'll take the risk, I answered. That night, Michelle really tried to do everything possible and impossible. The next morning, I was completely devastated. As I walked from the bedroom to the living room of my apartment, as we prepared to leave the next morning, I noticed her quickly pull something out from under her dress and put it in her travel bag. What is this? I asked. Oh, nothing, she blushed. Let me see, I said jokingly. No, this is personal. She resisted, trying to pick up her bag. I grabbed the bag from her and held it high away from her while she protested and tried to get it. Fighting her off, I reached into her and pulled out a purple device. What is this? I grinned. With a red face and a completely embarrassed look, she replied, It's called a Kegel machine. This is a simulator that helps develop the pelvic floor muscles. I want to be better in bed for you. Suddenly, a light bulb went on in my head. I smiled to myself, but outwardly tried to keep a calm expression on my face. I returned the Kegel master to her bag, handed the bag to her, and said without emotion, It works. I held her hand as we walked out the door. I made an appointment for surgery that same day at Dr. Noy's office and sent them a check for $10,000 as down payment. I was blissfully happy as Michelle continued to go out of her way to surprise me over the next 2 weeks. She actually asked if she could just move in with me until the surgery was over, after which she would move back to her apartment. I readily agreed. I was treated so well over the next 2 weeks. Her Kegel exercises using the machine had increasingly beneficial effects that I almost forgot about Giselle's revenge. And then the shit started. After a truly unforgettable evening where we sat facing each other, Michelle hit me with it. Although my roommate Katie will be able to help me a little while I recover from eye surgery, I need more help than she can provide. So I have arranged for my sister Giselle to come visit me along with her 16-month-old son James. She can't wait to meet you either. What? Was my stupid response as I tried to wrap my head around the fact that the bitch Giselle named the son she had with my asshole brother after me. Wouldn't you like to meet Giselle? She asked shyly. We had a tense conversation for the next few minutes. Of course, there was no way I could just say no, but I definitely didn't like it. Even though my appearance had changed so much that there was no chance of her recognizing me, and since my body had become muscular enough from going to the health club almost daily with Michelle, that it wouldn't be easy to recognize, at least clothed, I was still very worried. My voice didn't change, and perhaps I had some mannerisms that I didn't even know I had that might give me away. While I was worrying about this, Michelle gave me an even worse idea. I was thinking, Justin, could you please rent a bed and crib so Giselle can stay here with you in the living room of your apartment? My roommate can help me in any emergency at night, but our apartment is too small to accommodate them. How about a hotel instead? I quickly replied. She and I would both be glad if you let her stay here. Please, Justin. It will only be for the day of surgery and 4 days after it. Once my only problem is sunlight, it will go away and I will come back here to you if you will accept me. After that next love session, she immediately fell asleep. I lay with my eyes open most of the night, still working on how to avoid my cheating ex-wife from being in my apartment on the day of Michelle's surgery and 4 days after. I needed a worst-case scenario plan. I asked Judy, one of the college researchers who worked for me part-time, to figure out how I could temporarily change my voice. To my surprise, she found a solution within a couple of hours. Justin, there is a technique in which the doctor places cotton balls into your nasal passages. If you don't keep them for longer than a week, there will be few complications. Dr. Joan Phillips in San Mateo County says it can make a 10 to 20% difference in voice quality, Judy told me. Schedule me for an appointment with Dr. Phillips as soon as possible, I ordered excitedly. I had a hard time dissuading Michelle from her "Giselle will stay with me" idea. 2 days after Judy's report, I found myself in Dr. Phillips's office. She explained the theory behind her technique, played me 3 tapes of what she said were representative before and after dubbing, and gave me an estimate of the cost, which depended somewhat on what type of cylinders would best suit my specific passages. Cotton was not always the best choice, and sometimes much more expensive materials that were more difficult to get in and out had to be used. I arranged for her to perform the procedure on me the day before Giselle arrived, and then canceled the procedure 6 days later. The serious concerns I had were mitigated by 2 things. First of all, Michelle didn't recognize my voice over the phone when I had the procedure. On Dr. Phillips's advice, I told her I had allergies. Second, Michelle was so damn excited about her upcoming surgery that she looked like a kid celebrating Halloween, Christmas, and her birthday all at once. I had resigned myself to having to put up with my bitch ex-wife for 4 or 5 nights, and I had all sorts of plans on how to make myself afraid so I could be around her and her little brat as little as possible. On that fateful Thursday, I took Michelle to the hospital. My bitch ex-wife was going to take a taxi from the airport to Michelle's apartment, where her roommate Katie would be waiting for her. I stayed in the hospital until Michelle came out of the recovery room and then took her home. After an hour of talking to Michelle's roommate, a bitch and a brat, I was extremely surprised that Giselle made no sign that she recognized me. Michelle was devastated after her surgery, so after we ate Chinese food, Giselle, James, and I headed back to my house, leaving Michelle with Katie. The plan was for me to drop Giselle off at Michelle's apartment around 8:30 a.m., around the time Katie left for work. One of the things that Giselle had no problem sharing with me and Katie, as well as Michelle, was that she had just stopped taking her pills because she and Brett were going to try for another baby as soon as she got back. I'm going to be really excited because Brett has been out of town for the last 10 days and I'll be here for 4, so he better be ready for some intense ball play. Michelle laughed. The germ of an idea began to form in my tiny brain as I chuckled politely, and judging by the pained expression on her face, it was a shock to Katie. Giselle, James, and I were all tired when we got to my apartment, so I didn't have much time to interact with them before we all went to bed. My living room was quite large and sparsely furnished, with just enough room for a double bed for Giselle and a small crib for James. As I lay in bed with Giselle and James in the next room, the germ of an idea creeping into my teeny brain, while Giselle was talking about how horny she was, turned it into a diabolical plan. This would be the ultimate revenge. I really thought I could do it because Giselle demonstrated that she cheated her, and she's been giving me funny looks since we met. By then, I realized that these were not looks of recognition, but of gratitude. After I dropped Giselle and James off at Michelle's apartment the next day, I went out and bought some hidden video cameras. I also bought some backdrops for photography. I laid them out in my room around my bed and bought new sheets in a bright red color, which were very different from the 2 sets of sheets I had, both white. I made my bed with new sheets, removed the headboard, and put it in the closet. I couldn't believe how easy it was to seduce this Giselle. On the evening of Michelle's second day of recovery from bed rest, I suggested that she and I go out for drinks to celebrate Michelle's impending new life. I told her that I had a neighbor who would be happy to babysit James. She readily agreed. It was really hard to be nice to Giselle that evening, but knowing what was going to happen made it bearable. She voluntarily, without my encouragement, got drunk. She also had some interesting comments when she got drunk. The most interesting thing was her confession. Her speech was slurred, and there were random words in it, but the following is a joke. My biggest regret in life is that I treated my ex-husband badly. I should have kept my legs together when his brother tried to seduce me and done everything in my power to stay with him. I loved him more than anyone else, which is why I named my son after him, despite my current husband's objections. I wish I had a chance to at least talk to him alone before we got divorced, but he was so angry that he just ran away and I never saw him again. At least I know he's still alive because, a while ago, he withdrew the money that the court ordered to be kept in an escrow account for him. I pretended to be sympathetic. Although her words were somewhat comforting, They did not change one iota of what was about to happen. I needed revenge on both her and my asshole ex-brother. When I brought Giselle back to my apartment and paid the babysitter, she was so drunk that she took off her clothes in front of me. Maybe it was a deliberately provocative act, I don't know, but it made me feel better. I kissed her. At first, she offered only token resistance, and then showed her true promiscuity by saying, "We have to be careful because Brett and I are going to have another baby." "No problem," I said. A smile appeared on her face. I took her to my bedroom. I don't think she even noticed the photo backdrops or the unusually bright lights in the bedroom except to ask, "Are you going to turn off the lights?" To which I replied, "No, I want to see your beautiful body." This satisfied her. I put on a show. We made love. That's right. I didn't use protection that night. Then I took a shower. By the time she woke up the next morning with a massive hangover, the photo screens had been removed, the red sheets had been replaced, and I was acting completely carefree. After we had breakfast, she tried to kiss me. I stopped her, feigning surprise. "Hey, Giselle, you don't want Michelle to be mad at me for kissing you, do you? After last night, are you worried about the kiss?" she asked, completely confused. "Last night? What about last night?" I asked, pretending to be amazed. Giselle was truly amazed, and she didn't have to pretend. "After we had sex last night," she snapped. "What? You're kidding, right? After I saved you from that guy who was hitting on you at the bar, I just put you to bed," I said. "You must have dreamed." She thought for a moment. "Giselle, if you dreamed about this, don't tell Michelle about it, because I don't want her to think that there is any chance that I will do this," I said sternly. "No, this is not what I dreamed," she growled. I mentally laughed my head off as we drove silently to Michelle's apartment that morning. That night, I quietly high-fived myself when I heard Giselle tell Michelle that the day I slept with her was the day she entered the most fertile phase of her menstrual cycle. Over the next 2 nights, I managed to avoid too many one-on-one encounters with Giselle, and she was soon saying a tearful goodbye to Michelle after Dr. Noyes paid a house call. Yes, he actually did that, so there was no chance that she will be exposed to sunlight, to remove the bandages from her. Last night, I even drove Giselle to the airport and casually hugged her and James goodbye, hoping that bitch was pregnant with my baby. Dr. Noyes' surgery cosmetically improved Michelle's left eye so that it was so close to normal that it would only be suspicious if you knew there was a problem. I didn't realize how much this would improve her appearance, but I must say that her face was now beautiful. Dr. Noyes reminded us that the vision in her right eye should be 20/30, the best he could fix, after she had been out of the sun for 2 days. It will be at least a month before we know if her left eye will reach 20/40 or maybe even 20/30. "The surgery went as well as anything I've done," he said with a smile, "so let's cross our fingers." The day Michelle was able to leave her artificially darkened apartment, she cried when she looked closely at herself in the mirror in my apartment while I stood next to her. "Why are you crying, baby?" I asked her. "Now I look much better than I thought before. And now that I can see your face clearly, I can't believe that someone as beautiful as you would want to be with me. But mostly I cry because you gave me a new life." With these words, she turned to me and planted a passionate kiss on me. Then she pressed herself close to me and said, "The only reason anyone could be as kind to me as you were is if you loved me, Justin." "Do you love me, Justin? I love you so much it hurts." Wow. I probably should have been prepared for this, but I wasn't. However, I quickly came to my senses and said, "Yes, Michelle, I love you," and then kissed her. My reasoning for this was twofold. First, I wanted her to believe it because Giselle's pain would be even worse if I left her. Secondly, I may actually be in love with her, despite my attempts not to. After a few minutes of kissing, Michelle led me to the bed. "I was a bad girl while I was recovering," she said, pouting her lips. "How did you manage that?" I asked. Despite Dr. Noy's warning not to exercise, I use the machine twice a day. "I really believe I can squeeze a banana now," she giggled. Let's try, I said excitedly. By 5 months after Michelle and I had our first post-op sex, a lot had happened. Michelle's vision in her right eye became 20/30. In the left eye, it reached 20/40. With contact lenses, her vision could be corrected to 20/20 in both eyes, and she looked great. Sex with Michelle, both because of her exercise and because of the great true love she had for me, was incomparable. I couldn't imagine how it could be better in either quality or quantity. I had to admit to myself that I was in love with Michelle and asked her to marry me. She screamed, "Yes, yes, yes," as I put the ring on her finger. Brett received an anonymous DVD of his wife Giselle cheating on him by some guy in red sheets. My face was a blur of pixels, and nothing in the background of the photo, the bed, or the sheets connected it to me. I learned the following juicy details from my sexy fiancé. Brett's trip while Giselle was visiting San Francisco was extended for another 5 days. She was now clearly pregnant, and if she hadn't gotten pregnant the very day Brett returned, a couple of days past his fertile peak, then it was most likely my baby. Brett and Giselle didn't get along well and were probably getting divorced. Apparently, Brett didn't like the DVD. I guess he had no problem with my wife having sex, but when someone else did it, it was a big problem. The bigger problem for both of them was that they didn't have much money and their finances were in dire straits. Difficult enough for my mom and dad to help them, despite their advanced age and their own limited means. Michelle no longer worked as a hostess at the restaurant. She takes college courses part-time while helping me at work. It turns out that her eyesight was the only thing that hid a truly sharp mind, and she dove into research like a duck to water. My business is thriving. Now that I've gotten my revenge and I'm a much better man than I was before, I actually sometimes thank Brett and Giselle for being the assholes they are.